Welcome to NewsHour. Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney has called a snap election with both Liberals and Conservatives running neck and neck in the latest polls. April the 28th will be the day Canadians decide on their next government, meaning voters have little more than a month to make up their minds. Prime Minister Carney kicked off his campaign continuing to blame US President Donald Trump for creating a crisis in Canada. Caroline Malone has the latest.
Well, Guy, the Prime Minister of Canada, Mark Carney, is pushing back against US moves that are threatening both his country's economy and sovereignty. He's called for a parliamentary election on April 28th, bringing it forward from October, because he wants people's support in a trade and political fight with the United States. Well, Carney has said that we're facing a significant crisis of our lifetimes because of Trump's trade actions and threats to sovereignty. Well, President Donald Trump has repeatedly suggested Canada should become the US's 51st state. Well, some interpreted that as a joke initially, but more recently he's actually said he's serious. Well, the change in US policy to its northern neighbour gave the Liberal Party and Carney a surge in the polls, allowing him to come from behind to win their recent election and become the leader. More recently, polls have suggested 42% of people support Liberals and 37% support Conservatives in Canada, which means it's a good time for them to hold parliamentary elections and line up with the Prime Minister's party. The US has already imposed tariffs on some Canadian goods, with more tariffs due to come in April. Carney has already visited Europe and met with the leaders of the UK and France, but he has insisted he will not meet Mr. Trump of the US until he recognises Canada's sovereignty. Caroline Malone for A News, Washington.
Well, let's take a closer look now at how each of the main candidates kicked off their election campaigns.
In his speech heralding the election campaign, Canadian Prime Minister Carney took aim at US President Donald Trump.
I have just requested that the Governor-General dissolve Parliament and call an election for April 28th. And she has agreed. We are facing the most significant crisis of our lifetimes because of President Trump's unjustified trade actions and his threats to our sovereignty. Our response must be to build a strong economy and a more secure Canada. President Trump claims that Canada isn't a real country. He wants to break us so America can own us. We will not let that happen. I'm asking Canadians for a strong, positive mandate to deal with President Trump and to build a new Canadian economy that works for everyone. Because I know we need change. Big change. Positive change.
Conservative and opposition leader Poilievre also criticised Trump in his electoral speech, whilst promoting his party's Canada First approach.
It's been very blunt that he wants a weak Canada that he can target. And Liberals, after the lost Liberal decade, have made our economy and our country weaker and more divided, just like Trump wanted. Electing Liberals to a fourth term will weaken our country still. That is why we need to put Canada first for a change, with a new Conservative government that will axe taxes, unleash our resource production, build pipelines, secure our border, rebuild our armed forces, and stand up to Donald Trump from a position of strength.
The leader of the centre-left New Democratic Party, known as the NDP, Jagmeet Singh, followed a similar anti-Trump trajectory with the beginning of his speech.
Donald Trump is showing us in real time what happens when billionaires and the people who work for them are in charge. Everything gets more expensive. Rights get stripped away, and regular people are left to clean up the mess, while the wealthy walk away richer. We don't need that here in Canada. We don't need that at all. We all know that we're in for a rough road ahead. Things are already tough. And at the end of the day, only New Democrats will fight to make sure you don't pay the price when things get harder. I'm running in this election to fight for you, not the billionaires. New Democrats have a strong and proud record of getting things done. When prices skyrocketed, we fought for relief. When people were laid off, we fought for jobs and better support. When corporate greed ran wild, we went after the billionaires like Galen Weston, Elon Musk, and Jeff Bezos. Because when families are struggling, when your job and livelihood is on the line, when prices are soaring, New Democrats choose you every time.
Bloc Québécois candidate leader Yves Francois Blanc addressed the public with US, Israel and Russia issues.
I do not have the feeling that Quebecers trust so much Mr. Poilievre. And I do not have the feeling that Quebecers know so much about Mr. Carney. So if what they propose is good, they have nothing to fear, because as we did in the last 6 years, we will support what is good for Quebec. And if something is not good for Quebec, what would be the point for Quebecers to support somebody that will do something bad for Quebec? So I believe that I might not want to become Prime Minister of Canada, believe me, but I will to be as strong a leader as I can.
Co-leader of the Green Party, Jonathan Pedneau, together with his party co-leader, Elizabeth May, made a statement outlining the significant future challenges that Canada will face.
The role for the Green Party right now is to stand up for every single Canadian that's having a hard time because of politicians and career politicians standing up in front of them and constantly lying to them. We're not politicians. We're both people who have been to the front lines, have put our bodies on the line to fight for what we believe in. And at a time when values are diminished, at a time when politicians lie and equivocate, we tell it like it is. We're in danger. We're in danger of losing our planet. We're in danger of losing our country. And if we don't pull up our boots, we will face significant challenges. So that's what we stand for. We stand for a livable planet, a country that works, and communities that are strong and ready to face the challenges head on, but with open hearts.
Okay, so a wide range of viewpoints and political ideologies for voters to choose from then, but to what extent is the US president dominating the debate north of the border? A-News's Ube Sharbanda joins us now from Washington. Ube, always great to hear from you. Strong words then from Prime Minister Carney, blaming US President Donald Trump for Canada's current crisis. All the prospective candidates appear united in their contempt for President Trump's undermining of Canada's sovereignty. But on the flip side, this continuous mentioning of the US president guarantees he stays part of the debate.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, Canada is approaching perhaps its most unpredictable political moment in recent memory as the newly elected prime minister from the Liberal Party of Canada announced on Sunday snap elections that will be held on April 28th in Canada. This is after Carney, who's just been in office for about a couple of weeks, faced a potential no confidence vote by the Conservatives, who hold the majority in Parliament. Now, what's so interesting here is that just a few months ago, the Conservatives had a double-digit lead in the polls against Carney. And that now has shrunk to essentially it's neck and neck between Carney and his Conservative opponent for the election. President Trump is essentially on the ballot in Canada. I mean, President Trump has doubled down, tripled down on his belief and statements that Canada should essentially not exist as a sovereign country, that it should become the 51st American state. There were many journalists and experts here in Washington, when President Trump first made these comments, really wondered, well, is the president serious? And he is dead serious about it. I mean, every time he's asked about his views on Canada by reporters here in Washington. The president essentially says, well, we're subsidizing, the United States is subsidizing Canada. Why is it even a country? It would not exist if it weren't for us. So that view by the president of the United States remains firmly entrenched. And of course, that is going to be a major topic of discussion and a major topic on the minds of Canadian voters as they go to the ballot boxes. The conservative candidate for the election running against Carney is a young guy, 45 years old, has vast more experience than Carney when it comes to retail politics. But what's interesting here is that both the conservatives and the liberal candidates are for premier in Canada are taking a page out of President Trump's playbook by declaring Canada first. There is this renewed wave of patriotism in Canada, of the national identity, with many saying that they oppose any American effort to absorb Canada into the United States and to make it just another state. So, both candidates are going to be very leery of being compared positively to President Trump. With, in fact, we're seeing some centrist positions by Carney mirroring some of the conservative policies in Canada. That might have helped sort of narrow the gap in the polls between the two sides. President Trump says that there's going to be more tariffs coming in early April that will be implemented against Canada on top of the already punishing tariffs that have had a significant impact on the Canadian economy. And of course, the economy is going to be another major topic on the ballot for many Canadian voters. The question is, do you try to appease President Trump, given that Canada has only one international border, and that is with the United States. It is its largest trading partner, in hopes that Washington will ease off on the tariffs, particularly when it comes to President Trump's demands that Canada should do more to stop the smuggling, to crack down on the smuggling of fentanyl precursor chemicals that are entering the United States from the Canadian-American border? Or do you try to essentially dig deep, as the former Premier Trudeau was doing, and oppose American tariffs and put reciprocal tariffs? President Trump believes that, hey, Canada can try to reciprocate these tariffs all they want. Ultimately, it is the American economy that is going to win out, and he believes that the Canadians will eventually relent given the economic pressure. Of course, this election will largely perhaps determine the future trajectory of American-Canadian relations. And certainly President Trump is going to be a factor in this Canadian election. The American president saying almost on a weekly basis that Canada should become part of the U.S. and that he believes that any trade with America's Canadian neighbors should be part of American intrastate rather than interstate trade.
Very interesting. Okay, Ube, while we have you here, just update us, please, on the latest from Riyadh in Saudi Arabia, where peace talks between the US, Ukraine, and Russia have been taking place.
Yeah, we've been hearing a lot from President Trump's special envoy for the Middle East, and who's also become his special envoy for the negotiations, the peace negotiations with Moscow and Ukraine, Steve Witkoff. He gave a wide-ranging interview on Sunday. So on Sunday over the weekend, the Americans sat down for a multi-hour discussions as part of these technical negotiations with Ukraine, with the Ukrainian side in Riyadh. And that is being viewed as a positive indicator that relations, while they had frayed between Kyiv and Washington after that disastrous meeting with President Zelensky in the Oval Office with President Trump, those relations seem to be back on track, with the Ukrainians saying that they accept the American proposal for a limited ceasefire that would stop the targeting of energy infrastructure by both sides, by both the Ukrainians and by the Russians. So those technical talks between the Americans and the Ukrainians are taking place in Riyadh. And on Monday, further technical talks between the American and Russian side will also take place in Riyadh, the capital of the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. So there's no direct negotiations between Moscow and Kyiv. America remains the interlocutor, the broker of these talks. But what Steve Witkoff essentially told the press here in Washington over the weekend is that he remains very hopeful. He believes that President Putin of Russia also wants to end the war, as does President Zelensky. Of course, the devil is in the details. So when we talk about technical talks taking place between the American side and the Ukrainians and the Russians, what it essentially means is, how do you implement the ceasefire and how do you expand the ceasefire? The Americans want the ceasefire to be expanded across the Black Sea as then as a foundation for an eventual peace treaty that would end the war once and for all. So Steve Witkoff telling the American press that he remains hopeful that the war will end soon and that the talks between the Americans and the Ukrainians continue and the talks between the Russians and the Americans continue. We have seen some signals from Moscow being sent to Washington that they remain skeptical, but it's clear here that President Trump and his special envoy, who is essentially his most trusted foreign policy advisor and confidant, want this war to end quickly. And these talks in Riyadh seem to be focused on the details on how do we get to that ceasefire.
Thanks, as always, Ube. Well, that is all we have time for on this edition of NewsHour. Please stay with A News for more news and analysis. And from all of us here in Baku, thank you for watching.